Today we begin our discussion of the article How the Bobos Broke America by David Brooks that appeared in Atlantic Monthly in August. The article is based on a previous work of Brooks called Bobos in Paradise. The book traces the evolution, mating rituals, and nervous system of a new group of social animals, the bourgeois bohemians, or Bobos, who arose from the affluent educated class and reconciled the counterculture values of the 1960s with the entrepreneurial energies of the 1980s. Joining me in the discussion today are Stephen Smith, Larry Clements, and Dave Vislisel. Well, Larry, since you suggested, let me let you kick things off there. By the way, your garden looks very pretty in the background. I assume that's your garden.
That is what our garden used to look like. But
Until it
earlier in
dried
the
up like mine. Yeah.
earlier in the season, it looked like
Uh,
that.
uh, uh. Well, I'm very, as I mentioned to you, I'm a big David Brooks fan. I've read quite a few of his works, and I see him, watch him every week on the news channel on PBS, and always look forward to hearing him because even though he's one of the old style actual conservatives, he's not a Republican anymore. I don't think he claims that anymore, but kind of
Right.
like George Will and some others, they've um, I think the anti-intellectual nature of the MAGA movement sort of drove him out. But what attracted you to this, and what's your take on the work?
Well, I ran across this article late last year, and what really drove me to it, and enough so that I actually printed it out and suggested it here, was the what I hadn't seen the from the left was a any blame sharing, and or a lot. It was all pointing fingers at the right and saying, that they've got it all wrong and they're trying to kill everybody and destroy democracy and such. And it struck me that this was an interesting little treatise on how some of this might have evolved and how we got to a position where we see evil in each other and where that might stem from. And the idea that there's so much elitism on the left, at first that took me back, and I thought, well, what do I see that? And then I start thinking about, dominance in media, not only in broadcast and cable media, but also in the social type networks, Twitter, Facebook, and all those things. They tend to be rather left leaning, and it just sort of rolls from there. Is that there is a chasm there potentially between how people see what the left is doing and what they experience in their own lives and what their own personal cultural traditions might be. And we're not talking to each other. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the big thing. At the very end of the article, Brooks talks about respect. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is, that's a key element. How you find that respect is, really interesting, and it's a real challenge. My wife, just as an aside, she had her hair done today, and she said that the lady who did her hair, Marion has had COVID as well as I did or do, and she said that lady said she didn't believe in vaccines, and that she thinks that this is the hairdresser saying this. Thinks that the government controls all elections and none of them are fair, and that basically every conspiracy theory that you can think of, she was into, and that the idea that the evidence is out there, you just can't find it on Google. You have to dig deep for it, and just how disconnected we are. You can ridicule those kind of positions and the thoughts that might have brought those to her, but the idea of how distant we are, that's not a person that I would argue with, but it's a person that I would help her explore that a little bit further as to how she feels that way and what she thinks we ought to do. And so that to me sort of typifies the distinctions that we have between us. And I think Brooks is trying to get to that. I'm not sure he gets it all, but I think that he makes a good start of asking people from our perspective, to do some self-reflection as to where are you and what and actually how do your attitudes contribute to the problems we have, or as opposed to helping solve them.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the term Bobo has caught on. Maybe it's because the Bobos control the media and they don't want it to catch on.
That is true.
I have, I came across this article, some time ago, and it struck me, and I really have a lot of things I want to say about this, but I don't want to try to pile on. But the one thing that I like to focus on is standardized testing. And I want you to think about that for a minute. Ours was the first generation to take standardized tests. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means a kid like me who grew up in a blue-collar family, because I could score in the 90+ percentile on a standardized test, suddenly I'm put into a group with people that I never would have been with before. Nobody in my family ever went to college before I did. And it was standardized testing that got me there. And a big example of that, and how that kind of meritocracy is what they want to couch it under, but it's really, I don't know, it's your ability to play games. I mean, if you know how to figure out how tests work, you can do well on tests. But Bill Clinton was a prime example of that. Grew up, piss poor in Arkansas, and got a Fulbright scholarship. And suddenly here's this, nobody from a broken home in rural Arkansas who's elevated to governor and then to president. And that caused a lot of resentment. And then marrying this blue blood from up on the East Coast, Hillary,
right,
became even more despicable for a lot of people. So that's the first example that I had of this idea of the bourgeois bohemian, this person who came into money but doesn't want to really make money the issue. It's how smart I am. I must be better than everybody else because I'm much smarter, and that's how it struck me. Steve, I don't know if that registers with you or not. We went through that same experience of standardized testing. I know you perform well on that too. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And like you, I'm the first person in my family, either side of my family, to go to college. Yeah, the meritocracy. In fact, I thought the categories that Brooks laid out in the article, the categories breaking down a little bit within the left and the right, what brings people affinity or their allegiance to those parties. It's not the same for everybody, and it was helpful to me just to think through that. I also, and I'll try to get the link and forward it to you, I started watching a YouTube video of interviewing Brooks, where he is talking about what we can do to bridge the gap between, the left and the right, the blue and the red. And what he was saying is people who follow the Republican Party or identify with that as their tribe, they need to come up with a certain standard of honesty. They need to not promote, just falsehood. And that on the blue side of the equation, we need to have more contact with those people across the aisle and listen to them more and try to get away from this disdain that we have because they don't quite meet our standards of what's appropriate in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting. I didn't get all the way through it was, I forget how long it was, but it was somewhat long. I didn't get through the whole YouTube video, but I'll send the link later.
Yeah. Good. Dave, did this bell with you, the Brooks's article? Was it something that you identified with as well?
Uh, Absolutely. And a little more about Brooks. There's a couple things, a couple of areas I'd like to mention here, which you guys may know about and you may not. One is a writer named Thomas Frank.
Mhm.
I have a book of his called Listen Liberal. I don't know. He's also What's Wrong with Kansas? A couple of other books are pretty widely known. And I think I mentioned them on with the group here quite some time ago. What Frank does, and apparently he's a Brooks kind of moderate conservative, used to write for the Wall or work for the Wall Street Journal. That's one sign for sure. But he says the basis of it is whatever happened to the party of the people. And he, in 2016, when this book came out, he said that the liberal Democrats, the elite Democrats, the professionals, the new professionals, which is exactly who the BOBOs are, it seems to me, was identified by him as having hijacked the Democratic Party from the big tent, the common folks, the blue collar workers, the farmers, all the subgroups that really are the common people of the country. And he said they did that by, exactly what Brooks is saying here. They said, well, we're more elite, we're educated, and we think the party ought to go in this direction. We can all have, and they kind of left the common folks behind. And they, as Frank puts it, they hijacked the Democratic Party to serve their purposes and their means. So we've got an almost identical platform here from what little I read in the interview and so on. But I'm also a fan of David Brooks because I am not as liberal especially in economic areas as a lot of my liberal friends. I would call myself sometimes almost a radical left social position. But in economics, I like the old, I think capitalism is the best system that we've managed to invent. Although I think capitalism is on steroids right now, a whole different subject. But so I want you to know my point of view. In terms of the Brooks thing, I read a book of his, and I often, like you, Michael, listened to him on interviews. In the old days, there were debates, that he was involved in, and so on. What he wrote a book. I read one of his books called The Second Mountain, or close to that. What he said is, I grew up in the old tradition, and he kind of repeats it here a little bit, at least in the interview, is that he was a traditional, the WASP values, if you want, also, deeply embedded in the Jewish values. Whatever you come from, you've got to work hard. You got to be bright. You got to keep your nose to the grindstone, and you can make it. You can rise up, and you can become an elite in the old sense. Brooks was a product of that, at least on the edge of it, because he's about our age, roughly. You guys are younger than I am. I was more embedded in the old world. Okay. I didn't do standardized tests. Maybe there were a couple that I took, but I got into college and even graduate school never having taken an ACT or SAT or a graduate to get in. I went by my grades, the evidence of what I knew or whatever, interviews and so on. So I kind of preceded you guys just a little bit because I'm 83 almost. I must have preceded you guys a little bit by not being subject to standardized tests. Brooks was, and he had come, by the time he wrote The Second Mountain, he went through a very painful divorce that he did not see coming. So he's had a lot of personal trauma, which has led him to suddenly he realized he never knew Bob Dylan. He never knew the Rolling Stones. And he just fell in love with that stuff. It's almost like he discovered that. And he describes that in the second mountain, in which he says the first mountain is it's what we all do if we're responsible adult U.S. citizens, adults. We do the best we can to get a paying job, and that's often education, but it's also the trades. So once you get established and you've worked hard and you had a family and you've built that family and you've met their needs and so on, and now you're near retirement, you start to say, well, what's next? So you climb the first mountain all your life, but he focuses on the second mountain, which is who are you really and how can you find your soul, life, your mission, and so on? And that's what kind of led him into all this. That's a long way of saying that Brooks is kind of a reinvented, almost like he was like Paul was struck off his horse by a bolt of lightning. And I think he even uses that metaphor.
Damascus, right.
I found suddenly that my whole life had been kind of cheap. I wanted to mention Frank and how Brooks seems to be building on his notion. What's happened to the Democratic Party? It's been hijacked by BOBOS, really, is what he would say. Okay.
Well, I would contest that a little bit because it's not so much that the Democratic Party got hijacked, it's that the country changed underneath. The foundation of the Democratic Party, to a great extent, was labor unions. And labor unions took a big hit in the 60s. And what do you replace labor unions with? It's those young professionals who are now moving into, white collar jobs, who like me, who would have been in a blue collar job formerly, and people who now have access to education. And suddenly, after you've been through, 4 or 8 years of secondary education, going to work in the factory is just not a consideration you want to make. So I don't think it's so much that these people came in and robbed the labor unions and others of the Democratic Party, took it away from them. It was theirs by default because the unions disappeared. There wasn't any grassroots level organization. And I think that's what Bill Clinton fell into. And the big thing that I always point to is the real takeover of the Democratic Party. As Ralph Nader says, we don't have two parties. We've got one party. It's the money party. It has two branches. But the real takeover was when the Clintons came in and they decided, they said, explicitly, it doesn't matter what you think if you don't win. I mean, you can find the quote, that's not exactly it. But basically, it doesn't matter what your policies are if you don't win the elections. And I was appalled by that. I said, what do you mean it doesn't matter? It's like saying, what you think doesn't matter if somebody kills you. Well, yeah, it does. But somehow we fell into this idea that it wasn't how we thought or what our basic philosophy was. It's how much money we had. I mean, check your email. How many times do you get a note from, I get, honestly, 50 a day from Democrats all over the country saying, we're tired of Republicans. Send us money. Send us money. Send us money.
It's unbelievable.
Never asked me for a damn thing except money. Even local Democrats, they don't want anything from me except money.
That's right.
And that's what took over the party. It was that idea of winning at all cost. And
but you had to have money. Obviously, that was the problem too. The whole political financing regimen these days is that money is the essential ingredient. And so, how do you win without money? Is the issue. The Citizens United thing just blew everything up. I don't think people really appreciate how much that corrupted the political system. In spite of Justice Alito's protestations.
Yeah.
he's been wrong on other things.
Yeah. But Frank, like David Brooks, he does it better, at least in the interview. What I picked up on, Brooks attributes the current condition to a number of things. So the decline of white citizens, I mean, in terms of numbers, and the increase in the, well, you could call people of color or other cultures, along with, I think he mentions about 4 different reasons for why this is all happening. And Mike, I agree with you. It's certainly not, and hijack's probably a strong word, although you just said Clinton hijacked the party in a way. Mm-hmm. You didn't use that term, but Clinton was one of these people who said, you know, it's time that we smart people, we progressive people, we find out how we can win. And Clinton did as much as anybody, I think, in leaving behind the labor unions, the farmers, the workers in the Rust Belt, and so on. The very people who left the party as new, young, progressive, educated people joined the Democratic Party, the blue collar people feeling left out and left behind and ignored and not respected, they left the party, and they were perfectly subject to the savior Trump when he comes along and says, they've ignored you, they beat you down, I'm going to rescue you. Mm-hmm. And to a huge extent, including a lot of my family in Iowa, farmers and city people both, just flocked to him because he said, at least here's somebody who says, we've been screwed, and I'm going to save you. So he became the savior. That's the way I'd argue it. Yeah. The attributing, as Brooks does, attributing several factors to why things are the way they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in a country that alleges itself to be a democracy, and we're struggling with this idea of democracy now, it always puzzles me that people do not focus on increasing the enfranchisement of all of us. In other words, if you really love democracy, you should want to have everyone involved. Everyone.
That's right.
And when you make money the measurement, you automatically exclude most of Americans. You know, if you keep asking them for their money, you know, I mean, I make this personal. You know, I don't have a lot of money to give anybody. I may make a $50 donation to a candidate, but I can't drop, you know, like can't drop $100,000 in their lap. So what do I count, or how much do I count in comparison with someone who can put the big money there? So that's very discouraging. That's a dropping off point for a lot of people. Like I'm not part of that system. You know, it's like going to a polo match or something. I'm not part of this. I don't belong here. It's not in my class. And I like the way Brooks lays this out as it's almost a caste structure. You know, we were reading the book Caste a few months ago, and I would contend that it's a mistake to always view this separation between left and right as a binary thing. It's really a mosaic of lots of different people who are affected by lots of different things. In a small community, the amount of money you have still makes a difference, but perhaps not as much as it would in Manhattan. You know, where unless you're dropping $100 bills, you don't get into the places that the wealthy come near them. And so this idea that it's either left or right ignores the fact that there's a lot of division, and it has to do with how much, you know, what's your total wealth? That's part of it. Do you own or do you rent? You know, that's a big breaking off point. Have can you afford to educate yourself. You know, there are things that separate people, and once somebody's been left out, it's very rare that they would feel involved in the political system, which is all it's circling around with money. I mean, I have when I think about the big money politics, I remember the picture of Bill and Hillary with Donald Trump at a party, and they're all dressed to the nines. You know, like you're hanging out with this guy, right? I don't, at any rate, I don't know if we're going far astray from the original topic here, but the title was "How We Broke America." Is this group, this Bohemian group, really responsible for breaking America? Is this the real fault?
I haven't read his whole book, of course. It's just the interview and the similarities, but he really hit the high points.
Yeah.
What he thinks are the factors that have created this, and he does. Even in the interview, he doesn't say much about how to fix it. So it was a relatively short one.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the troubles in his own life. He self-identifies as one of these bourgeois bohemians.
Yeah.
He calls himself a bobo.
He is. He's an intellectual. He's a writer. He's got a lot of money.
No.
You know, he does. I mean, he may not be a multi-millionaire, but you know,
he's successful. Yeah.
Millionaires are a dime a dozen these days. You know.
Larry, are all of us bobos? Do we fit that category?
Well, I don't. I think that what Brooks has done is again he's identified that there are blind spots that some of us have, maybe many of us have, regarding how our attitudes affect the reasons that we do have so many divisions today. And I think I can identify with that. I think I have to, I have to push myself to make sure that I'm listening to the other person's perspective and how the changes that have taken place in the country over the last 20, 30 years affect people who are perhaps in a more rural or disadvantaged area of the country. Kentucky used to be Democrats. Mm-hmm. And it took just a generation for that to flip. And so, something changed there. And I think a lot of what's happened there is that a lack of involvement and a lack of development among those peoples. And, I think that a lot of the causes of that have come from being ignored from the Democratic side. And I think, on the other hand, I think the Republicans kind of like it that way because they've got an angry base out there that all they have to do is to say the right words, and presto, you elect Rand Paul. So it goes like that. They don't have to do much. They just don't have to screw it up.
Steve, according to Brooks, he's laying the blame. I mean, the title is there, "How the Bobos Broke America." I'm wondering, is that an honest statement there? I mean, it's trying to make a point, and I think those points are well taken. That we have to listen to people who don't agree with us, and we can't be too self-righteous and haughty and so forth. But are we the ones responsible for the separation and the division in the country? Did we do it?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. First is, Michael's, maybe you know, but I don't think Larry and David know. My daughter is a senior editor, the number 2 editor in New York Magazine. So I get a lot of, what goes on in publishing, in the family. And so I would say my first comment on the heading of the article is the editors help the writers make up titles for the article that will catch people's attention so that more people will actually want to read the article. An article that says "Bobos Broke America." First of all, you go, "What the hell is a bobo?" And how So I think that's part of it. But then on the other hand, I think there's something real about this system, this societal system that has the creative class holding a lot of power, and particularly those who go the Ivy League route and have money behind them. But even more broadly, for example, I would certainly identify myself as a Bobo, but not of the wealthy end of the spectrum, more just in the creative. As a professional, and not just in the work professional. I'm a visual artist as well. I like the creativity. I like the culture. I get a lot out of various aspects of the culture. It means a lot to me. But I'm insular. I'm in this little, bubble of people who are like me, who value the same things that I value. And so I think there is something to the divide that we have created in the system of meritocracy that's not really a level playing field as far as a meritocracy, right? You might have more of an advantage if your parents are helping you along in all the steps it takes to become a member of that elite.
Yeah. It seems to me things might be changing. Larry, you and I both have sons about the same age. Matt is, I guess, 45. 45. Yeah, so is Dustin. And I think it's different for them. One of the things, when we talk about the meritocracy, and I brought up the idea of testing, but in a broader sense, education, when we were high school and college age, getting a degree was not exactly a guarantee of success, but it was like getting getting on the boat. You had a ticket and you got on the boat.
Yep.
I don't know that that's true anymore. I don't know that that's the case. And I think it's a crisis. I think Biden tried to address that by throwing some money at it, but he didn't hit the point. I don't think he understands it, that this idea of going to college puts you into a different caste, that you're now, part of this elite group. And it's not true anymore. You can go to college all you want, but that's not the route to financial or social success anymore, like it was for us to a certain extent. I mean, I didn't join the country club or anything like that, but I was able to walk the door and apply for a job. He talks about how people can go in confidently and talk about themselves and express themselves confidently, and that's what gets you in there. And these more aristocratic people can do that, and people coming from more humble backgrounds can't. And so I wonder, has it changed? I don't want to get too personal with it, but what would you say Matt's take on this is? I think these guys.
Well, Matt didn't finish college, so he spent 20 years as a firefighter.
Yeah.
And retired recently, and now he's doing other jobs, and that don't require a college degree. Our daughter Allison, she got a marketing degree, and it got her a customer service kind of job.
Yeah.
Which didn't necessarily require a college degree, and she ended up going back and getting a master's degree in occupational therapy. So back in our day, I think that it did get you in the door. I got a really good low-paying state job.
That's a familiar story.
Yeah, all of us worked for the government at one point. Yeah.
So that lasted a while, but the reality is that I went back and got an advanced degree, and she did, and my wife did. So I think probably across our period of time and into the current kids, it takes more than that, unless you're into a high demand type of profession, engineering. those kind of things that you can actually get by to use that as a stepping stone. I think we've moved past that, and what I see colleges nowadays is high school refinement. It gives you all those things that you ignored in high school. Now you can go back and study and actually learn how to write a sentence and and deliver a coherent idea.
Right.
Speak about some things that are relevant to what history and all that. So,
well, statistically, what I've been reading at any rate is in the last few years, people are more and more. I mean, it's a swinging in the direction of, is college even worth it? It's gotten really, really expensive. And somebody was saying, when I was 30 years ago or 40 years ago, I paid $120 at U of L for my tuition. Today, it's whatever was quoted. It's not only inflation has boosted that to about 10 times that or a little more, but tuitions are way above that. And I can't remember where I read that. He said, what the hell explains it's kept up with inflation, the rising cost of tuition, if you isolate that. But why is it 10 times that much more? Where is that money going? It's not highly paid professors for the most part, although my son-in-law, Evan, who's now 7 years a philosophy professor at the College of Wooster in Ohio, it's a pretty darn good little school, heavily research based. But he's making maybe in the area of $65,000 or $70,000, and he told me that as of late, the technology professors and the business professors are making double that at Wooster. That's what's happening, and a lot of this movement is also reflected in that kids who technology is huge and it's changing so rapidly. People don't even go to college. They just jump in, they create little businesses, and they go on. And you can be more successful financially if you don't go to college. You're wasting your time for 4 years. You're spending a lot of money that you could be putting into creating a small business. That is a big trend, and who knows where it's going to go. Maybe it'll level off after a time, but I think we're just beginning to see the early and middle stages of that. Why the hell send your kid to college? Just give him $100,000 and send him off to create a business.
Well, I think that the one of the things that I think I got out of college, and I think a lot of people did, is not just the pure knowledge itself, but the ability to think, the ability to critically reason, and it is a challenge to develop that in the vast, all your citizenry if you don't have some focus on that. And it puts a lot of pressure on high schools if you expect them to be the organization that teaches kids to really problem solve, to understand how you make decisions, and just basically live an intelligent life. So that would be a loss, I think, if we just really de-emphasize college, or at least some other experience that gives kids who are at the latter stages of their maturation the ability and the challenge to grow intellectually.
Right. Well, in a way, the kids who bypass that have had pretty good parental. They've grown up with privilege and money. Often, maybe even usually, that allows them, if they're smart, to go off in these directions with, the ability to take care of that later, or they've learned that because they've gone to better schools, and God knows that schools at least in our town, the difference between middle schools and high schools, even elementary schools, is of a big magnitude. You know, there's the elite public schools, and they're the schools that some kids go to where, you know, they're 2, 3 years behind the kids in the better schools. I mean, that's rampant in Louisville and throughout Kentucky, and I think probably across the country. That's another factor of the elite movement.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way to send my kid to Manual High School, like private in quote.
Yeah, you got to do it soon.
What it takes to get in is sometimes politics. You know, you maneuver around the systems, and then the middle schools are like that too. So people are being groomed to go into that, and you know, and it's sucking in the elites, the people who know what's going on, the educated parents, versus well, I'm a truck driver. I don't know. Yeah, kid, you ought to go to high school, but no idea where. That sort of thing is
one of the things that just not to get too more on a tangent. What I think is true around here in Louisville is that you have these elite schools like Manual and other schools that you know, sort of cherry pick the better students, and then you have so many students that are in the parochial and private schools that also you know, take a lot of talent and a lot of good influence and good upbringing types of behaviors out of the public schools and into the private schools, which leaves the private schools just you know, starving for intellectual challenge or people that you know, kind of get it, that act as examples to other kids and so forth. It's really a dilemma. Everybody wants their kids to go to good schools.
And it's the BOBOS who succeed in sending the kids to the good schools.
Yeah.
Well, we say good. I'm not sure what that means. Is going to Country Day really? What is it now? About 25,000 a year, something like that.
Well, what you get at Country Day is you get all the connections. You develop
there you go.
that are going to tell you where to go find your future.
Right.
Yeah. And that's true for Trinity and St. X and all these other places as well. You make there. That's one of my. I don't want to make this all about education. I think you guys have heard my feelings about that. But schools are the biggest obstacle to education we've ever created. You know, we somehow think that you can't be an educated person unless you go to the good school. Well, you know, Lincoln didn't. You know, you can be a very bright person and not go to any school. It has really nothing to do with education. It may have the contacts and the, you know, the socialization aspect of it. That's fine. But when it costs you your entire fortune and more to do it, it's, you know, it's the equivalent these days. Going to an expensive private school is like joining a country club. You know, if you can afford to do that, that's nice, but you know, not many ever will. So we could educate our population in a different way, but we have this one model of you know, a graded program and all the social things that have to do with proms and graduation and all that business, and we think everybody aspires to that. And so we put everybody there in a situation where they have to do it. And yet, you know, if you're at Country Day, your prom is really great. If you're at, you know, Doss High School, it's pretty mediocre. You know, that's the way it is. So why do we force people into a situation where they're going to naturally be on the bottom rung of the ladder? You know, it's the reason why people at Country Day are succeeding is because people at other schools are failing. And that gets back to the caste idea again, that you have to have that mud sill down below. That terrible public school means that you know, a St. X or Trinity is a good school. Why? Well, look how bad the other school is. Not, you know, I was at Trinity for 2 decades and you know, sent kids there. They are not that great a school. None of them are, in terms of the classes, the qualifications of the teachers. It's just not there. It's okay. It's average, but what gets people in there is the elitism. It's that, I'm going to suddenly put my kid in a situation where be amongst the, the real winners. And that's the, for everybody who is a winner, there are several people who are losers. And those losers really resent the winners. And I think that's what it was going on here. These Bobos think they're so damn smart. Well, it's only because they got a privilege that I didn't get. They're not smarter. They're not better than I am. And I think that happens with a lot of people. A guy who's a successful plumber or electrician looks at someone who has a degree in fine arts says, "What the hell do you know?"
I'm going to go be an actor.
Yeah. That's it. I think maybe schools are seem to be at the core of this. I mean, this is the one common experience we have. We all go to school in some form, and the winners go through the best schools. Why? Well, we put all the winners there. That's why they're winners.
That's because their parents are winners.
Right.
That's
You're born on third base, thought you hit a triple, right?
I'd like to ask you guys a question. If you've read the book, and Larry, have any of you actually read Brooks' book here and completed it?
This was just an article.
This was an article. This is an Atlantic.
This is an article on the book. What I have a difficult time understanding is the title is How the Bobos Ruined or Destroyed.
How they broke America.
What is at the core? What I didn't pick up from the interview is, what does he mean it broke America? Is it the single biggest factor that is destroying America? What does he mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
My sense was that, first of all, that at the very end of the article, it says the original headline was, when it was originally published, is "Blame the Bobos." So what he's really trying to do is point out to my mind, some culpability that this particular group of people, that include me to some degree and others, have laid out patterns that essentially have disenfranchised or certainly ignored vast swaths of the country, and those people watching what we are doing has caused them to be alienated, and it's a cause of divisions between these two groups of people, however you define them. Mm-hmm. It's a cause for division.
Yeah.
So it's
Bobo.
The Bobos, in some sense, have driven the blue collar or the uneducated, the not creative class, and however that's defined. It's another question I'm kind of hovering over. Driven those people toward Trump.
But is Donald Trump a Bobo? Now look at his life. He was the son of a real estate agent out in Queens. He's all his life he's wanted to make it in Manhattan. He's wanted to be the part of a different different caste than he was born into. And he has that kind of resentment, even though he's got a lot of money and has had, he's been president, he's reached the summit, but he still has that resentment. So is he, I don't know how somebody...
I don't find his particular brand of identification legitimate. I don't think that he's recognized that these people out here have these grievances, which is a very smart thing on his part. And he's decided that the more he plays to that, the better off it is for him. Back in the day, he was a Democrat. He supported a lot of the things that Democrats support.
That's true.
And he saw something that allowed him. He tested the waters by saying that Obama was born in Kenya, and he found that he got footing from that. And I think then Obama pissed him off at the correspondence dinner, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So he's perhaps a Bobo. He's a chiseler. He's a manipulator. He's a, his niece, a psychiatrist or psychologist, wrote a book about what made Donald Trump who he is, reflecting on his life with his father, very demanding, and she was comparing him to her father, who was kind of the manipulated, more honest, straightforward. You, I am what I present myself to be, compared to Donald, who figured out how to, using his father, manipulate his way through the early days, and he found it. He was rewarded by it, and maybe it's, I can't remember if it's how much like his father he might have been.
Well, we've been talking about how we can relate to people on the other side. Doesn't Trump offer us a model? I mean, certainly he did. He found a way to connect. Is there some way for the folks on the left, Steve, to use the same tactics to connect with these folks?
Well, there's an inherent difficulty in that, because I don't think we value grievance politics or fear-mongering politics. And I would not categorize Trump as a Bobo. I'd categorize him as what David Brooks calls, I think if I say it right, a bourbo, a boorish,
Bourbon,
or a boorish bourgeois. Okay, so he became, successful by his brand of, tearing down other people. And back in 2015, when there were 16 Republican candidates looking for the nomination for the presidency, he was making fun of Carly Fiorina's looks and Rand Paul's looks, and at the time it seemed like, where's this guy coming from? He's poking fun how other people look in a presidential debate. That doesn't seem right. But that was just the beginning of what he was doing to be deliberately tactless, to deliberately not be politically correct. And it just, a lot of people who had felt unheard and disrespected by the elite, it was a way that they would behave as well. And so there was a natural affinity. I don't think he reached across the border. I think he was on the same side of the border as they were.
I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, still am. Is his brand of politics grievance? He talks about the 1%. He talks about how unfair it is for people, unfair to not have universal health insurance and so forth. I'm curious as to why that appeal doesn't register with the same people.
I sense that Trump's real strength is his ability to manipulate fear.
Yeah,
and that's it is grievance, but I think it is even more so. It's touching into that part of a person's understanding of the world, where they think that something's going to be it's being taken away from them, or they're never going to get it. And he's a master manipulator of fear. And I think that the Democrats have traditionally not done that, but I suspect that maybe Joe Biden is doing that right as we speak.
Yeah.
Joe Biden's going to talk about losing democracy and semi-fascism and those kind of things that are designed to touch the most basic chords of the people who are interested in not having the Republicans in charge.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether the average American even understands what fascism is. I wonder how much they know about history. I see these You know, Jay Leno used to do interviews on the street with people, and he'd ask them obvious questions like, you know, who was fighting in World War II, and about half the people couldn't identify whose side we were on. You know,
But
so
they did.
I wonder if Joe talking about fascism, if that's even going to register.
Well, I think that people don't know what it is any more than the right knows what communism is or socialism
Or
is.
socialism, yeah.
All you know is it bad?
It's a bad thing.
Bad thing. Is it Hitler? Is it bad thing going to do bad things? And that's the level that people end up. It hits those people.
Yeah. Well, I hope it works. Sarah Palin lost yesterday, so that there is hope.